being in the same room doesn't mean you're actually connected. Real connection has to be created with careful attention to yourself, your setting, and your colleagues. It is a business imperative. Without it, you're failing to lead in the way this era of disruption demands. But don't worry, by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly how to build purposeful connections.
So connection just goes one big giant step further than communication, because connection requires reciprocity. If I hopped on this podcast and all you did was talk at me, then you would be communicating at me, right? We would not be in connection.
That's Michelle Johnston. She is a professor of Loyola University, New Orleans, an executive coach, and a podcast host. She wrote The Seismic Shift in You, the 7 necessary shifts to create connection and drive results.
As an executive coach, I was seeing that the old style of creating a culture of fear, shame and blame, very machismo, jerk boss, those leaders were in organizations for a long time and they would get promoted.
Yep.
And I started to see the seismic shift was them getting pushed out, and leaders who really showed that they cared about their people were getting promoted. And that to me was a seismic shift.
Michelle and I both recognize that there are mega shifts happening and massive shifts leaders need to make. One of the biggest shifts Michelle believes you can make right now is in your energy.
If you can get up every single day and recognize as a leader, everyone is watching you. Your energy is palpable and it is contagious.
That's just one of Michelle's 7 shifts. Here's what else we get into. Language you need to stop using immediately. Questions we need to start asking today. And how to connect with yourself first.
You have to embed time off screen. You have to embed time to go for that walk. Because if you're just on, connecting all day, you end up a Zoom zombie.
Here's what I've noticed. The very best leaders work at connection. It doesn't just happen. I'm Dr. Cindy Pace, and this is The Shift Forward. Don't forget to stay tuned for my final thoughts on the connection shift. Let's go.
Thank you, Cindy. It's so good to be on your podcast. I know I haven't seen you since London in November of 2025 when we launched the Seismic Shift in You. And the reason why Marshall Goldsmith and I wrote this book is we were in London in 2023 for the Thinkers 50 Awards. And he and I were listening to all of the top thinkers in the world. And the question on the table in 2023 was, how in the world are leaders going to compete with AI? How are they going to compete with technology? What is their role? What do they need to lean in towards? And the theme that, even though that was the question that all of the top thinkers 50, they were answering that question, what emerged was the theme that leaders needed to lean in with heart and humanity. And that is the only way we're going to be able to compete with technology, is lean in with our heart and humanity. And that's when I looked at Marshall and I said, that's a seismic shift. If I've ever seen a seismic shift, that's one right there. And let's write a book about it. And so I said, will you be my co-author? And he said, yes. And Cindy knows Marshall Goldsmith. And for your listeners who are tuning in, Marshall Goldsmith is the #1 executive coach in the world, #1 global thought leader in the world, and a New York Times bestselling author. And he wrote the seminal book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. So he's very aware of seismic shifts. So he said, let's do it.
I love it. The thing about shifts, and I of course I love that word. You have the seismic shift in terms of your podcast and the book, and I'm starting with the shift forward. at the heart of that for me is the power of transformation. And we know that we, as Marshall Goldsmith has said in the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, we cannot continue to do what we've always done and expect different results. We're at a point in time now, I think the change is so rapid. I call it relentless disruption because it is not letting up. It's not, oh, that was a big change. Let's have a little moment break and then we'll come back to the next change. It's a constant changes all around us. Disruption is all around us. So when I think about shifts, and what I like that the way that you and Marshall have approached this is shifts can be big, shifts can be micro or small, yet have seismic mega impacts on the people that we serve, the organizations where we work, and greater society. So when I think about it as transformation, the goal, what I've been thinking about is how do we get leaders to see change as something that can be an opportunity that can happen for them, not against them. And when you think about that from a connection standpoint, Michelle, what is it that we need to unlearn in terms of how we're currently connecting in this age? And what can we start to lean into? And you can pull in any of the, one of the 7 or some of those shifts. But what kind of small changes do we need to make in how we are connecting as leaders?
So what do we need to unlearn? What Marshall and I found is that leaders, the majority of leaders who reach the highest the rungs of the ladder, end up telling us that they feel empty inside, that they thought they were doing everything right, that they kept going after more money, bigger promotion, better job title, increase in responsibility, more people working under them, and then they just worked longer hours. They worked more, to use your word, relentlessly, and they just were grinding it out to get to that top. And so they get there and they realize that they had forsaken the most important relationships in their life. Many of them had. And what's interesting about that's why we wrote the first chapter, the first seismic shift is to shift from what, thinking that's what success looks like, to the shift to who. And I'll give you an example. I coach a CEO of a hospital system. His name is Pete November. And I was meeting with him in person. I said, Pete, when he became the CEO, they had just gone through all of these acquisitions and they were huge and he had to lay off people. And that was painful for him, particularly as a brand new CEO. The last thing you want to do is your first job is to lay off people. And so when I saw him, I said, I can feel this peace within you and it's palpable. How did you get there? He said, Michelle, my first couple of years as CEO were anxiety. I mean, I had a lot of anxiety. I would wake up each day and my calendar was telling me, what? And then I shifted. And he said, now I wake up every day and I think, who do I get to work with? Who do I get to inspire? Who do I get to develop? Who do I get to collaborate with? Which patients do I get to help heal? How can I serve our community better? And by focusing on the connection part, the people, the who, he said that changed everything because then his mindset with that shift, it shifted his energy and it's palpable and contagious and more people can feel that. So that is the first shift. As a matter of fact, Dr. Vivek Murthy was our U.S. Surgeon General under President Biden. Mm-hmm. And he wrote a book called Together because he went on a listening tour when he became the Surgeon General to figure out what health platform do I want to solve? What health crisis do I want to solve for? And so he went on a listening tour across the country. And that's when he discovered what was causing the most anxiety was the addiction to technology and how it was creating so much loneliness and disconnection. And so then that became his platform. And then he looked at the health detriments of all of this disconnection, isolation, and loneliness. And he found that it's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
I think some of us came up at a time where we're really repeating systems and habits and behaviors that were already in play. And we took that as, oh, is this what success looks like? Is that I will just focus on the what, who that comes in, to your point, that's kind of transactional. It's kind of like, what can you do for me versus how well do I actually know myself as a leader and how well do I know my team? So I think that shift it's essential. The other thing is when you were talking about the former Surgeon General and loneliness basically being an epidemic, I have heard from people, especially senior leaders, that's like the unknown secret that no one is really talking about, is that when you make it to whatever that level of aspiration was for you, you are kind of expecting, I don't know, a choir to come out, confetti to drop, presents, I don't know what you're expecting. But when it doesn't happen, what we don't talk about is the feelings of loneliness and also identity crisis. Who am I really? Yes, I have this title. Yes, I might have access to resources now that I didn't have when I was at a different level in the organization, but I don't quite maybe know, is this what I was really, making all these sacrifices for? Is there something that you could pull out and offer someone that is currently, they're listening to us now and they're like, that is me. I am in seismic shift number 1. I'm trying to figure out who I am. I don't even know if I like my team anymore, because people talk about that. You can't say that. You go into meetings and you talk about how great your team is, but maybe you're like, do I even know my team?
Oh, there it is right there. That was it.
Do I know
Cindy,
these
do
people?
I even know my team? So thank you for asking. How you go from what to who is now you spend more time getting to know your team as humans, getting to know their stories, getting to know what really makes them tick, what motivates them, what are they most proud of. And that is a part of this large shift towards connection is, if you are just kind of not necessarily phoning it in, but just so task-oriented that you really haven't picked up your head up to really understand and know your team, then you're missing out on, I think you're leaving a lot of potential performance at the table because you're not getting the best from your team. You're gonna get the best from your team if they really feel like you care about them, you see them, you understand them, you're a great listener, you want to develop them, you want to make sure they're in the right position for their strengths, you want them to succeed. So I always say in order to go fast, you have to first go slow in really getting to know your people and getting more connected with your people. We had a gentleman, Scott Miller, I had him on my podcast, and I asked him a similar question you just asked me. I said, Scott, so what if, how do you recommend people go deeper in a virtual meeting with connection? And he said, Michelle, I'm not really great at connection, and yet I know I need to do a better job. He said, so I recommend to anybody listening to this podcast, say just honestly, the next time you hop on with one of your team, either a big team call or just a one-on-one, just say, I recognize I have been so task-oriented. I haven't spent time really getting to know you at a deeper level. This might seem a little awkward to you because I haven't really spent much time doing this before, but bear with me because I really care, and this is going to be good for us and the organization. He goes, just put it out there like that. So that they're not wondering, why is my leader now asking me personal questions? You got to frame it, right?
You have to frame it because we're at a time people are looking to the left and to the right, and they're seeing the changes in the organization. They're seeing people being impacted by technology or just by business decisions in terms of changes in strategy. And so if you all of a sudden show up and start asking questions like you care, they're like, am I on the chopping block? I remember, and I'm sharing this from an example. I just said, "Oh, I'm gonna really spend more time getting to know my team, talking about, how was your weekend? What are you reading? And not that I wasn't always that way, but I started being more consistent, and I started doing it outside of just one-on-ones, having check-ins just about you and how you're doing. And they're like, is there something we need to know?
Because this was a new Cindy, they were seeing a new side of you.
They're like, are you preparing us for something? Like, we love talking about it, but is there some new change happening? And then I just flipped it and I said, what are you hearing? And then they said, we're hearing that there's going to be changes. And I said, okay. Then I just stopped how was the movie to, so what are you concerned about? What is, and I've talked about this in other episodes, but what is within my power right now? How can I don't know if I can put you at ease, but I want to listen. What are you hearing? What's concerning to you? Do you believe what you're hearing? What is making you believe that? What evidence can you point to? And then they just start telling me about a whole different grapevine. And that's another thing. Leaders are in a different level, going into different meetings, hearing different information. Your team is in it. They are on the field. They are at play. They are hearing things left and right that you're not hearing. So if we treat this as only I know the answer, only I know the direction, we're not going to go anywhere. And they actually schooled me on what they were hearing, and they were not off. They were not off. And so I had to go and do my own due diligence. And I said, okay, so that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to start asking, what are you hearing? Because clearly I don't know.
Oh, isn't that something?
Right?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great, vivid example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it just goes to show, I was just in Nashville yesterday working with SC Johnston, and we talked about how, unfortunately, humans assume the worst.
Yes.
And so as leaders, you have to give them as much data as you can so that they understand the why. So when you do what you just said, Cindy, when you said, oh, I really want to get to know my people more. I feel like I haven't really done that. I'm going to start asking them questions. And they immediately are like, why is Cindy doing this? Is there something going? Am I about to get laid off?
Right.
You are absolutely right. It is all about how you frame it. So you can say things like engagement scores are at their very lowest, 20% now. People are just not engaged. And I believe that it is in large part because of these meetings that are so convenient for all of us. And I love them because I rarely have to leave my house. However, these virtual meetings are really hard to promote engagement, right?
Oh, my goodness. Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
I want all of your listeners right now to take out their phones and pull up their calendar.
Okay.
My question is, does your calendar reflect the most important people in your life?
It does
Are
now.
the most important people in your life, right, it does now. Are the most important people in your life on your calendar? And then here's the big question. Where are you on the calendar, Cindy? So are you embedded in your calendar? So those are my two questions to all of your listeners. As you're looking at your calendar, are you, number one, are you embedded for your health and your wellness? And number two, are the most important people in your life personally and professionally embedded on there? I'll give you an example. At my book launch party, I was with you for my book launch with Marshall in London, and then I came home and had a big connection book launch in New Orleans. And so about 220 leaders came.
Wow.
It was just a really great time. And then we did a fireside chat. So my 80-year-old dad was there. My brother and sister-in-law were there. And as I'm talking through, I asked people, I said, just make sure that you're intentional with connection, because if you don't put yourself on your calendar and you don't put the most important people in your life on your calendar, guess what? It's going to fill up with reaction.
It's so
and then
true.
you're not spending time with what aligns with your important relationships. And I gave an example. I said, for example, if you have a family and you go to the beach every year, make sure that June date is on your calendar every year, or all of a sudden Years will go by and you're like, God, we were supposed to go to the beach. We didn't go to the beach. So my dad, brother, and sister-in-law, we went out to dinner afterwards and we looked at each other and we said, can you believe we've never gone to the beach together? We always say we're going to, and now how old are we all? So Cindy, my family and I just got back from the beach. The first time we all went together to the beach because we realized how fast-paced life is. And it just gets away from you. And if you're not intentional with connection and you don't put it on the calendar, it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. And you're so right, because there's one of my favorite places I've been going to every August for the past, well, I've been going there for about over 15 years, but in the past 6 years, I've been going every year. And it's been consistent because I immediately put it on the calendar. The other thing I wanted to pull back to with what you just talked about, the calendar and priorities. I had a leader who I reported into. She was our CHRO. She's retired now. And I learned so much from her about scheduling time and prioritizing. She prioritized time in terms of steps that she needed to get in. And she knew that, okay, we're in an office and most of us are going from meetings to meetings. She would prioritize, I'm going to get my steps in. I'm going to walk from this floor to this floor. She had that on her calendar. She had breaks. So you know how, and I've noticed this with a lot of people, especially executives, the back-to-back meetings, like you're in one meeting and you're actually already late for the next meeting because it was back-to-back. She started scheduling these 30-minute breaks in between to give herself time. She also scheduled connections. So one thing I loved about what she used to do is come on the floor where the majority of us that were in, whether you're a COE leader, all of us that are in human resources in different roles, she would come down and pop in your office, pop in to see how you're doing. But that's when all of our great ideas came up. She would pop in and I would tell her about some article I read, or I'd send her something, she'd send me something. Then she'd go and meet with other people. And I think about what you're saying now, and I realize she prioritized herself.
Connection.
She also
Herself
prioritized connection
with others. I love
with
this woman.
Others.
With you.
I'm going to give her a shout out. Susan Podlagar. Susan Podlagar. That is what I learned from her. And it wasn't, management by walking around the floor. It was, how are my people doing? And she didn't think about it as my people. She thought about it as our team. And that's another thing in terms of framing. Do I feel like I'm working for you or with you?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Because I think that can shift in how I connect with you, right? If I'm working for you, I'm kind of like, oh, there's a hierarchy, I'm reporting in. But if I'm working with you, now I feel like I can have an opinion.
Totally.
Right?
Just by the language you use. If I'm working for you, then I'm not going to speak up as much, because you're right. It creates this invisible hierarchy. If we're working together, I'm working with you, then I feel I give myself permission to show my excitement, share my opinions, share my ideas, just by changing from for to with. Isn't that fascinating?
And so that's the shift that I made in my leadership is I work with my team. I stopped saying this person is on my team to saying we're team members. If I introduced someone, if we're out in the team, we're all out, I would say, hey, this is such and such. This is, we're on the team together. I stopped trying to make a distinction in hierarchy, because I realized, okay, yes, I know that this is my team and we're working together, yet they're leading in spaces. I'm not leading in that space. What I'm doing is I'm offering support. I'm offering to remove barriers, a listening ear, mentorship, sponsorship, coaching. But I am actually not the one leading that project. So let me step back a little bit on needing to be like, and my team, and to our and we. And I know that that's a whole conversation around that, but I do think it changed how we related to each other. And I always said, thank you for your leadership on this, because I wanted them to know that leadership wasn't just about the position. It's the act of leading. And we all have the opportunity and ability to do that. And I wanted them to see themselves as leaders before this, positional power or authority took place in their lives. And I think that matters, because that didn't happen for me. It was like, no, wait your turn. One day it'll happen. That impacts connection.
And I also love how it occurred to me that management by walking around used to be a very popular phrase, right? Get out of your office. When we were all in the office, get out of your office and manage by walking around. And now, because we're much more in hybrid situations, you can't just manage by
just
walking
walk around.
Right. You've got to lead through connection. That's what I just realized. Yep.
and being available. I can't tell you, just knowing that we use the term ping if you're on Teams, or, some people maybe have Slack channels or whatever. But knowing that you can ping your leader to say, hey, do you have a minute? Or she can ping you. And what I realized, though, because hierarchy is a thing, if I would ping a team member, I'd say, hey, nothing urgent. Just wanted to get your ideas on something. Would love to run something by you, because I know if I'm doing the pinging and I say, hey, do you have 5 minutes? They have created a whole story.
Correct.
Of what I want, right? And they get on the line and it's like, you just wanted to know, should this be green or blue? Are you serious?
I love how you said that. That's one of my favorite phrases from Brené Brown. Is she says, we all make up stories, so let's just own it and just say, hey, when you asked about this project, the story I'm making up is that you're not happy with the outcomes. Just own the story that I'm making up. The story that I'm telling myself
exactly
is the following, right? Because we all go into that overdrive. Yeah. So that leads me, since most of us are operating virtually in meetings, to shift 4, which is we have to shift our meetings so that they're more connection driven. So one of the other habits we need to unlearn is stop treating your meetings virtually like they're in person, because we're not getting the same dopamine hits. We're not in person having those organic connection moments. So you have to be super intentional of how to create dialogue rather than just hopping on a Zoom and talking at people and just saying, hey, thanks for gathering today. Here's the agenda. We need to go over 3 things. And as soon as we do, you can hop off and get to your next call. That's transactional. That doesn't create dialogue, and it doesn't create connection. So we need to unlearn, and we need to be more intentional. So how do you do that? I've got 3 recommendations for your listeners. Number 1, I do think during COVID, we did a good job on all these virtual meetings of having icebreakers. I call these connection questions, and a lot of people now don't use them anymore. We need to bring those connection questions back. For example, a lot of my leaders love when they meet with their teams either once every 2 weeks, some meet once a week, some meet once a month. They ask the same question at the very beginning of the meeting. On a scale of 1 to 10, and you can do this when there's 10 or less usually. On a scale of 1 to 10, Cindy, how are you doing both personally and professionally? And when you do that same question every week, then there was this guy named, we'll call him Tim. And Tim was never, ever more than a 3. Whoa. And if you didn't ask that question every week, you wouldn't know that Tim's just a 3. But if Tim blew something out of the park, man, he was an 8. We were all like, woo, Tim's an 8. Gosh, because you have this barometer, right? You have this pulse check of your people. Some other leaders are using the connection question in the very beginning of their meetings. Let's begin with shout outs. Who deserves a shout out and why? And that
I
goes
love
really well
that.
too, because
I
it's
love those.
positive, it's collaborative, it begins with celebrating wins and showing appreciation. Some leaders like to begin with gratitude, and every single meeting they say, okay, what are y'all grateful for? So
I love
again,
that too.
we
Yeah.
need to bring back connection questions, and you need to choose them so that it reflects who you are as a leader and it gives you a barometer with your team. I have two other suggestions of how you as a leader can run more of a connection-driven meeting. Number two, one of the things that we do in 100 Coaches, and for the listeners, that's how Cindy and I met. Yes, we met in London at Thinkers 50. We actually met through Dr. Ruth Gotian.
We sure
Cindy and
did.
Ruth were in the PhD program together. And Ruth and I are in an organization called 100 Coaches. We gather together every 2 weeks to elevate each other and celebrate world-class performance and leadership. So we know why we show up. Then Marshall hops on and he gives us the topic. Marshall talks about his expertise in the topic. And here's what my recommendation is. Every single time we do this call, we then go into breakout rooms, because a call of 50 people would feel transactional, and it would feel like Marshall's just talking at us every 2 weeks. So why should I even show up? And if I show up, why should I put my camera on? However, because we all utilize these breakout rooms, we go deep.
I love that. I worked with Franz Johansson, who wrote the book, The Medici Effect, and the team over at the Medici Group in designing ended up being an award-winning team effectiveness program called Endeavor. And this is the first iteration of Endeavor, because it went through some changes, but one of the things that people used the most was what we called micro teams. And in essence, it's what you're saying. It's this ability to break out into smaller groups where you have, not only you're creating a sense of connection, you're also creating more space for psychological safety and voice. And where I saw it work really well is the CEO of my former company had something called the Strategic Advisory Group. And these are like, senior leaders that are leading businesses, functions across the organization, coming together to really problem solve, do some future visioning. And we would have people come in and share insights and information with us. And then we would go into breakouts. And the thing that I loved on how this was designed, so shout out to that, the chief of staff and the head of strategy, and how they designed these groups, was they helped people learn how to facilitate. So we all got the questions, and we knew there's going to be a facilitator. It's a smaller group, but it's going to be someone that's going to make sure that you all get the opportunity to have voice. And then we're going to have someone that is going to take the notes for you all so that you can be fully present. And then when we come back to the larger group, you'll have the opportunity to share.
Oh, that's so fantastic. Micro teams. I love it. And, it's interesting you had mentioned facilitating, and because that's the third recommendation I have for how to shift meetings is rotate the agenda so that you're not the only one in charge. So, for example, you had talked about earlier in these virtual meetings, often our days are just, wait, I'm going from this meeting. Oh gosh, I only have 2 minutes until the next meeting, or I'm already over the next meeting. And yet you as the leader, you're in charge of all of the meetings. So you're not probably showing up with your best energy, right? So why not, if your goal as a leader is to develop your team members, why not say, okay, if we're going to meet as a team once a week, once a month, no, let's do once a week. I'll take the first Monday, right? And I'll facilitate the first one on the first Monday. And then Cindy, will you take the second week? And you can be in charge of the connection question. You can be in charge of getting all of the agenda items, and you're in charge of facilitating that. And then John, can you take week 3? And then Alice, week 4, and rotate it around? because then this takes the pressure off. The leader
One
can still say,
person.
hey, exactly. The leader can still say, hey, don't forget, here are 3 priorities of the company. Here's our strategic, here's what we need to, accomplish. And you're giving them an opportunity to facilitate. So just like what you were talking about earlier, I loved your example with micro teams. Utilizing those small groups, you're absolutely right. It gives people permission to speak. It gives them voice, and it makes them feel safer because it can be very overwhelming. That's why you see a lot of people not putting on cameras.
Something else that popped up as we've been talking is the power that a leader has in facilitating conversations. I don't think we can leave it to chance. So this, underscores being intentional. This underscores, you talked about earlier, like bringing our humanity, bringing our compassion. It's letting someone know, I value working with you. I really am excited about what we're doing, and I want to have this keystone moment, this keystone conversation with you so that we can have a successful project.
I love it. I love it. So shift number 6 is shift your language. And I was interviewing Sam Horn, who's an expert on words to lose and words to use to create more connection when you're having a conversation with somebody. And one of the words, and this is a Marshall Goldsmith-ism, one of the words to lose is but.
Ooh.
Every single time I'm with Marshall, he will charge anybody $10, $20 if they use the word but. Because but discounts everything you say before it. So Cindy, this was a great podcast episode, but next time, can we please whatever? And you're
Right.
like, really?
You're like, wasn't that great then?
Really? Yeah. You don't believe nothing. You just don't believe anything because you use but. And then if you replace it with and say, this was such a fantastic podcast conversation and I cannot wait to promote it because this was powerful and I hope that people can learn from the content. And is a word that elevates connection, but is a word that dismisses connection. Another word to lose is just. So as I shared with you, I was just in Nashville working with S.E. Johnston. And so I give my big keynote and then I have to go to a book signing. So I'm in this booth with S.E. Johnston and they're selling promoting all these sanitizers.
Okay.
And so they're trying to get all these scientists and these IP, infection prevention people in hospitals to come and learn about their sanitizers. So these people are coming up to the booth and they're like, hey, I want to learn more. And I found myself saying, oh, I'm just the author. I'm just the author. I'm just the author. And I was like, I'm not the, and somebody said, stop saying just. How embarrassing is that I'm the one who wrote the book on it. I'm the one who said not to use just. And I found myself saying, I'm just the author. And it took somebody else to say, you're minimizing yourself. You're not just anything. You're not just anything. You say, I'm the author. Let me go and find somebody who's an expert for you. Just minimizes. I just need a second of your time, Cindy. Well, your time's really valuable. Why am I minimizing it? Right? So just is another word that you can lose. So Sam Horn has all of these words to lose and words to use, like you should do this next time. No, how about next time, right? Next time, why don't you think about this?
Yeah, how about how about next time we try? Yeah. And so that goes back to the role that communication plays in connection and how we have to be very intentional about what we choose to say and understand how it could. Now, it doesn't mean you won't make mistakes, but really thinking about how would I like this to land?
Totally.
Intention really matters from the beginning of how you're going to phrase things and maybe even test it. I used to test stuff all the time and say, okay, this is what I want to say. And what do you think? And if it's a don't say that, then I don't move forward with it. Right?
You're so right. I used to love the Stephen Covey quote when he wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He said, the only message that really counts is the one that's received.
There you go.
And so connection just goes one big giant step further than communication, because connection requires reciprocity. If you're connected, if you're in connection with each other like we are today, we are going back and forth, back and forth. There's reciprocity. We are connecting. If I hopped on this podcast and all you did was talk at me, then you would be communicating at me, right? We would not be in connection. So connection requires reciprocity.
What I want to know from you, there are a couple of things. What made you choose the term seismic shift?
Yeah, as an executive coach, I was seeing that the old style of creating a culture of fear, shame and blame, very machismo, jerk boss, those leaders were in organizations for a long time and they would get promoted. And I started to see the seismic shift was them getting pushed out, and leaders who really showed that they cared about their people were getting promoted. And that to me was a seismic shift. So I decided to write a book on what I was seeing. And then I was working with my publisher and I said, there's just this huge shift that's happening. And I'll never forget, my publisher said, yeah, it's pretty seismic, isn't it? I said, that's it. That's the name of the book. So my first book was named The Seismic Shift in Leadership. And what it did was it identified the pattern that I was seeing, that the jerk bosses were finally getting pushed out and the connected bosses were getting elevated. Halla frickin' Luya. So I as a researcher, right, my first book was, okay, let me just share what I'm seeing and then put terminology to it. There's a seismic shift in leadership happening. It's all about connection. And then I interviewed all these leaders. What do you do to connect? Because I didn't know. I didn't write the first book knowing. I wrote the first book trying to figure it out.
Okay.
And then the second book, The Seismic Shift in You, is when I figured it out with Marshall. And I said, okay, I got it. Here are the 7 things you can do to be a more connected leader.
And it's interesting because you use the term seismic shift, which I love. I've heard McKinsey and others use tectonic forces, and I'm using the term megashift, which I did not coin the term megashift, but I actually thought I had, but I hadn't. I came up with megashift from following Alvin Toffler and Future Shock and, going into mega trends. And I was like, what I was noticing in organizations was there needed to be a mega shift. I was looking at how change happens at, the individual level, the interpersonal level, organization. I call that the micro, the micro, the meso, the macro. And the mega shift is these shifts that were happening across industries, across organizations, that required us to change behaviors. And I started noticing one of the shifts that I started noticing first was this shift in what is work and where does it happen? Coming off of the pandemic, it was, okay, we can work in different ways. We can work in a hybrid format. We can work fully virtually. We can work in office. And there was this pull to want to go to shift, what I call shift backwards versus to shift forward. And shift backwards is I kind of want to go back to what I know that worked in 2022. Well, hey, we're in 2026. So I'm not saying things in 2022 don't work, but the future is being shaped right in front of us. And so I started to see this kind of avoidant pattern of the future of work. And how is the future of work being shaped? It's going to be shaped by our behaviors, our habits. And so what we once did is not going to get us to where we need to go. And so that's why I called it the mega shift. So I love that in this episode, we've had coming together the seismic shift and the mega shifts, talking about connection, which I identified as a mega shift. We need greater connection. We need a greater understanding of what it is. You taking us through some of the seismic shifts, I think has been really phenomenal. And these are things that leaders can apply. As we close out, I think we have a couple of more that we want to make sure that, our people leaders are listening in on. So if you want to close us out with a couple of more of the shifts,
We
and
have
then
one last shift.
yeah,
Yep.
one
We have
last shift.
one last
Okay.
shift, and that's your shift in energy.
Oof.
Because what we have found is when I was starting to write this chapter, I thought it was going to be your shift in environment and how important the environment of the office had to be in order to create connection, and the placement of furniture and all of these things. I really thought it was environment until I interviewed Gary Ridge, who had been the chairman, the CEO of WD-40. And he just was this connected, driven leader who had some of the highest engagement scores. He grew the profit, by 400%. His metrics were unbelievable as CEO. And yet he said they did it all in this dingy 1960s office space. He said, we were very intentional of how to create connection. He goes, and I'm here to tell you, it's really about the energy that people bring. It's not about, if we had the perfect environment, then everyone would feel good. It's about the energy that you bring. So he said, if you can get up every single day and recognize as a leader, everyone is watching you. The meeting that you're running is the most important meeting to every single person. And yet it's one of 10 that you're running, right? The dress that you throw on, the suit that you throw on, the this that you do that. Just recognize that as a leader, your energy is palpable and it is contagious. So energy is the final shift of own it and be who you are as a human, and also know as a leader, you have a great responsibility and that people are watching all of your moves.
It's so true. I love this. And I've talked about it to a couple of our contributing experts that we've had on, most recently, Dr. Wanda Wallace, and this importance of managing energy. I think it has a lot to do with leadership maturity. I think many of us have to grow into understanding how we manage our energy, and to your point, that our energy has an impact. One of the things at my former company we used to say is, leaders bring the weather. So are you cumulus cloud, 84 degrees, sunny outside, or are you tropical storm, Eric, coming through, blasting through everybody's screen or blasting down the hallway? And I'm not saying that you have to be perfect in managing energy. You just have to know, like you said, your energy matters.
Cindy, we speaketh the same language. You know what I've learned in all of this research on connection, which I didn't know before I started doing all of this, that in order to be really connected with others, you have to disconnect sometimes. So you've got to, so you have to embed time, like you said, to get enough rest. You have to embed time off screen. You have to embed time to go for that walk. Because if you're just on, connecting all day, you end up a Zoom zombie. You really, really do. So you're absolutely right. You have to be aware of the energy when it's low. What do you need to do with your calendar management to give yourself more of a boost? It is, leadership, I wish to goodness it was a hard science. It's definitely a dance, and you've got to figure out the dance yourself, what your body needs. Yeah.
I like that. A dance.
Thank you so much, Cindy. This has been a delightful conversation. I'm just glad that we got to spend this time together.
We won't build our best workplaces if we can't connect. Here are my final thoughts on how to do that. What is missing from the way we connect? First of all, I think what's missing is for us to understand that we actually have a connection crisis. And it is a huge public health threat. We actually need connection to survive. We cannot live with a lack of being bonded, a lack of empathy and understanding. So what I want people to know is that this has to be one of the most important things that you do. We talk a lot about how to eat well and how to sleep. We're exercising, and all of these things are fantastic to our health. So is connection. Connection with others, being bonded to others, being able to communicate with others and be in community. We have to prioritize connection, and that's why we have to work at it. Thanks for joining me on the show. I have a lot more in store for future episodes, so make sure you subscribe and follow The Shift Forward.